Welcome, this is the trusty Cessna 170 Skyhawk in X-Plane 12. Currently parked at the West Apron, as it's called in X-Plane 12, also known as the parking bit next to the fuel bowser. In reality, I don't think I've ever seen a Piaggio on the West Apron. I don't think there's long enough runways to get that in safely. The longest runway is only 600 meters long, and that's the one that you can see in front of you, 01. And tomorrow I'm doing my first solo, if I can do three good landings off the trot. So let's just jump inside the aircraft. I'm trying to make sure that there's no noise from this cable. There we go. So what I'm doing tonight is I am practicing my circuits, because I have to do 3 clean circuits and 3 very good landings in a row, otherwise they won't let me solo. So I thought I would bring you on my practice journey. Now, I did also see on Reddit earlier on there was a request or a question about some of the basics of the Cessna and just general aircraft, general aviation in general. So I thought I'd go through a few things that we do. I actually have the Cessna 152 or Cessna 150 and Cessna 152 checklists in front of me. So let's go through them, because this might be useful to somebody out there. So the first thing that we do is we check to make sure that there's no control locks in the controls. When your aircraft is parked, you might put a lock in just so that the wind can't make the flight controls outside, these things flapping about. Basically, if the wind lifts up or pushes down any of these flight controls, these are reversible flight controls, so this will move about in here. So what you do is you lock it off here, and then they effectively get locked outside too. But you have to take those off before you try and fly, otherwise accidents can happen. There was a recent accident. I think he may have been a stunt pilot, but there's video of him taking off in a Cessna, nosing up sharply, and then effectively nosediving and hitting the ground quite hard, and yeah, sadly they died. And that was because he'd apparently left the control lock in. So this is something I'm very sensitive to, and it's something that I always check for, and that's the first item on the in-cabin preliminary checks. Next is the magneto switches, which is down here. So the magnetos are effectively the spark plugs, and they keep the engine running. We don't normally leave the key in, so the check is make sure it's off, which is the one on the left hand side there, so it is off, and the key is removed. We can't remove the key, it's a simulator, we'll let it off. The next thing to check is the parking brake, which is this lever here. Now, we've got 3 aircraft at my flight school, and none of the parking brakes work on any of those aircraft. So generally, at this point, we would put our feet, our toes, on the toe brakes, like that, knock the rudder pedals forward, and that would then hold the aircraft in place. But because we have a parking brake in the sim, I can't be bothered to hold the toe brakes down. Next, we'll turn on the electrical system. So all of the electrical circuits start over here where the master switch is. So when we turn those on, you can see you've got a bit of light, so you can see the fuel gauges start to move because these are electrical gauges. We don't have any radios or avionics over here yet because those are on a separate switch here. These textures are not looking particularly good, and that's why. Texture quality is right down. I don't really care so much about ambient occlusion. I do care a bit about anti-aliasing. I would like good quality clouds, shadows. I don't care so much about rendering distance. Would like a few world objects. I would like a little bit of vegetation density. So give that a moment or two just to load. You can see it says there LC rocks. LC is my daughter. So I've updated the messages.txt file, which is in the root of the X-Plane 12 directory, with some nice little messages for my daughter. Basically trying to get her involved and interested and excited about flight and aviation. It's kind of working for anybody out there with kids. It's a subtle trick to basically let you do a bit more flight simming without them whinging too much. Okay, so let's just quickly check that we're in the same state. So control locks and covers are removed and stowed, magneto switches are off, the parking brake is on, master switch is on, rotating beacon. So what we do at this point is basically we're checking the lights and the pitot heater. Now what you can do is you can turn each light on, get out of the aircraft, check it's on, come back in, turn it off, try the next one. The much more sensible thing to do, of course, is knock them all on. And also we turn the pitot heater on, we jump outside, we check to make sure we've got a red navigation light on the left hand side and a flashing strobe light. We check to make sure that we have 2 blinding lights on the wing there. One of them is the taxi light, one of them is the landing light. And on the right hand wing we're looking for a green light, green nav light, and another flashing strobe light. And finally on the tail we are looking for, if I can just turn that around, can't see it particularly well, but we have a flashing beacon. Now then, on the real aircraft we would also go over to the pitot tube, which you can just see at the top right hand side, top right hand corner of the screen there. The pitot tube is actually inside it. It's actually just a very, very thin tube, and this housing around it is heated. So you just gently hold the outside of that housing to see if it's getting a bit warm, and if it does, that's fine. It means that you have a working pitot heater, which is very important at the moment because we've got temperatures below 5 degrees Celsius, so we would leave our pitot heater on in flight, especially in icing conditions. Okay, so turn all the lights off. Next thing that we do while the master switch is on is we check the flaps. Now it's very easy to go from the flap, to hold down the flap lever and move it down in sections while you're in the aircraft, just swivel your head, but because we're in a simulator it's not as easy to do, so we will lower the flaps 10 degrees, that's our takeoff flap, so we take off with 10 degrees flap. 20 degrees, that's generally what we land with normally, and then there's full flap, 30 degrees flap, which is what we use for things like steep approaches where we don't, but basically there's a lot of drag when you've got full flaps, 30 degrees flap. So you use that to maintain a steady speed with a steeper descent rate on steep approaches. I'll be honest with you, I haven't done any more than 20 degree flap arrivals yet. So that all looks good. They are symmetrical. That is definitely something that we check for. You don't want one side of flaps to come down and the other side not to. We make sure at this point that the radios and everything are off. We make sure that the fuel cock is on. On this aircraft there is no off. You can either set it to both fuel tanks, the left fuel tank, which is basically the left wing, or the right fuel tank, but we'll just leave it on both so that the fuel drains through from both fuel tanks equally. And at this point we turn the master switch off. Just before I do that, so I've got a SciTech Pro, and it's got the 3 levers for the throttle, the propeller and the mixture on it. And what I've done is I've changed, because this doesn't have a propeller pitch control, I've mapped the elevator pitch to the propeller lever, and it just gives you more analog control over that axis, and I find that works a bit better. So we just make sure that the trimmer is that we can move the trimmer all the way forward, all the way back, and then we set it neutral. What we also do in the real aircraft, that's not what I wanted to do. We go around the back of we look out the back of the aircraft. We pull back on the controls so we can see the elevator trim tab, and then you can see we can move it all the way forward, all the way back, and then we will put it neutral. There we go. Top tip, pull back those controls so you can see the elevator trim tab from the cockpit. Let's just get that lined up back with the takeoff arrow there. Marvellous. First aid kit and fire extinguisher we are not going to check for because it's a simulator. Okay, and then at this point we do an external check. We check the leg and fairing, the tyre, the hydraulic line, which powers the brakes, the calipers for the brakes. We check the disc brake itself to make sure it's not pitted, there's no cracks, it's not damaged. And we check the wheel nut is secure, and there's normally a pin that goes into it. We just make sure that that pin is in and it's secure. At this point as well, we also make sure there's no that the creep marks on the tyre aren't showing any creep. So there's basically a red line painted, or a red square painted across the tyre and the wheel. And if those aren't perfectly lined up, then we know that the tyre isn't fitting properly, and it's creeping on the wheel. That's not what you want, because it means that as you apply the brakes, the tyre can still go around. So the wheel will be stationary and the tyre will creep around, and that basically means that the brakes are useless, which is not a good place to be. So then we would check the left wing, we would check the propeller and the front cowling, then the starboard wing. We would then check the starboard undercarriage, the fuselage, just make sure that the side of the aircraft looks good and it's not damaged. There's no, I don't know, woodpeckers have pecked their way into the side of it and have nested in the side of it. That wouldn't be fun. Check the tail, check the rudder, check the horizontal stabilizer, check the fin, check the elevators, have a look at the trim tab again, although we have just looked at it. Get a closer look, make sure there's no damage to it. And as we go around, because the flaps are still down, remember, you can see the flap lever is still down. As we walk around, we check to make sure that the linkages look good, the hinges look good, there's no, nothing looks broken, there's no leaks from any oil or anything like that, just all looks good. Basically these aircraft are, you can basically tell if something's broken because it breaks. And it's not a big deal because these things are robust and there's redundancies and there's usually at least 2 attachments for everything. But you can see that a bolt is missing, or there's a linkage completely sheared off or something like that. Not a big deal. Yeah, it just is what it is, and you just speak to the maintenance people and they will sort it out for you. So at this point we would get back into the aircraft, check to make sure the seat is in the right position. Yep, there it is below us, that's in the right position. Hatches and harnesses. So hatches and harnesses, we've got a lot of mental checklists that we go through, and H is usually hatches and harnesses. Hatches being the doors, harnesses being the seat belts. So we'll just make sure that the hatches and harnesses are adjusted and secured. So at this point, put your seatbelt on. Make sure it's secure. And also there's an over shoulder belt as well. I don't know if it's actually modelled in this. Let me have a look. Oh, it is. Oh no, this is a 3-pointer. Yeah, this is a fancy pants aircraft. It's not what it's like in the 150s that I fly, which are from the mid-60s. Okay, so seat is adjusted and secured. Hatches and harnesses. Double check again. Parking brake is on. Radios and avionics are off. Instruments are undamaged, legible and secure. Yep, that looks pretty good. Mostly because they are digital instruments in a simulator. Flying controls, full and free movement in the correct sense. So again, easy just to sit there and do this while you're inside, but what I like to do in the sim is have a look out the back, zoom in a bit, and check the left aileron. Yep, 1 up, 1 down. Check the right, 1 up, 1 down. If I pull back on the controls, I would expect the elevator to go up, which it is. If I push the elevator, the controls forward, I can see the elevator's going down. And then finally, the rudder pedals, I hope I've plugged these in. And I have, there we go. Rudder to the right, rudder goes right, rudder to the left, elevator goes left, the elevator goes left when you're pushing down the left rudder pedal, then you've got to worry. Okay, so that looks good. Flying controls, full and free movement in the correct sense. Trim, set neutral, we did that before. Cabin heat off. Just double check that. I don't like just saying things without double checking it, but yes, that is neutral. Cabin heat is over here, so you pull it to go on, and it's not modelled, so yes, that's a check. Do we have cabin air? No, that's not modelled either. Oh, I don't know if you've seen this, but there's a little model of Austin who founded X-Plane in the glove box. Alright, Austin, go away. Cabin heat off. Mixture, full and free movement. So let's try that. Again, I have the SciTech throttle quadrant, so full and free movement, and we set it to full rich. Throttle nut, there's no throttle nut. which is basically this round bit here at the front, and you use that to sort of make the throttle lever harder or easier to move. And when you're flying, you want it to be quite difficult to move. You don't want it to be moving by itself. So there is no throttle nut on this system. Throttle, yep, definitely full and free movement, and then we just add a little bit of throttle just so that when we start it up, it's not going to be sat at idle. The engine's going to start warming up. Carb heat. There is no carb heat on this 172. Some 172s do have automatic carb heat. And this is a bit dangerous because my 150 that I fly does have carb heat. You do have to operate the carb heat as soon as you bring the RPMs back below 2000 RPM. So you kind of have to operate the carb heat and the throttle at the same time. Normally it's carb heat out, throttle out, or you do if you're doing a go around, you're coming into land, you don't like it, or if you're just doing a touch and go, so you've landed brilliantly, which sometimes occasionally happens to me, but not very often. You've landed the plane, you want to go back up for another circuit, then you'd push the throttle to full, and you'd also, in a 1-2 action, number 1, throttle forward, number 2, push that carb heat close so you get full power from the engine. So right here, let's put the throttle back to 1/4 inch open. No carb heat. Magnetos are still off, and at this point we would put the master switches back on. I've left them on, okay. Now the reason why you definitely want to turn the master switches off earlier on in the real test is because when you turn the master switches on, it basically powers this counter over here, known as the... It's going to come to me shortly. This should be on the tip of my tongue because I know it all the time, or I mention it all the time. Anyway, but this is basically what counts the number of hours that the aircraft has been in use. That's the number that you get charged on at the end of your flight lessons. So make sure that your master switch is never on for longer than you need it. Top tip, your engine will run quite happily with the master switch off. But you didn't hear that from me. Yeah, do not try that in flight. So master switches on, circuit breakers and fuses. So what we do is we look down here at these fuses above these switches, and you can see the ampage in each of these fuses, and if any of these had popped out, then we would know that a fuse had blown, and we probably wouldn't accept the aircraft in that situation because it means that there's something wrong with the electrical system. Fuel cock, let's just check it is on both, pointing forward, correct. And at this point we turn the beacon on, so any vehicle or aircraft moving around an airfield needs to have a flashing beacon on it, and with aircraft the flashing beacon also means that an engine is running or about to start running. So we put the beacon on. Next check is primer, so we put a little bit of fuel into the engine. If you don't have a primer, like on this aircraft, you probably don't do anything, or you may choose to just do a couple of pumps of the throttle, and that'll just make sure that a little bit of fuel is delivered into the engine. Finally, we do a quick lookout, make sure there's nobody around the prop, and then we open the door. How do you open the door on this? There you go. You open the door and you shout, "Clear prop!" and then you shut the door again. Especially this time of year when it's freezing. And at this point, you put the key in, you turn the magnetos to both. Let me just check the mixture is fully rich. It is. And we will turn that over, and there we go. There is life in the flying machine. So now we do our ROSAMs check. So I'm going to do this from memory just because it's just good practice more than anything else. So ROSAMs, the R in ROSAMs means set your RPMs to 1200. Doesn't have to be perfect, but in the sim you can get it perfect like that. O is oil pressure. You can see the oil pressure is in the green. The oil temperature will move into the green in a moment. It should be there within 30 to 60 seconds. S is the starter warning light. Make sure that the starter light is off. I don't think there's actually a starter light on here. And what that basically means is that the starter motor has turned off. So it's not doing that. The starter motor isn't constantly running, because that's bad. It means it's not difficult to turn the engine off. You just pull the mixture, but it's not doing what it should be doing. So S is the starter motor. A is the ammeter. So the ammeter is basically an alternator, and before we started the engine, this was draining or pulling power from the battery, so it was showing a negative charge. But now it's not quite positive, but it's handling. The engine is providing enough electrical power to run all the systems. So ROSAMs, we've got to A. M is mixture. So we want to make sure that both the left and the right magnetos are working, because basically this is a redundant system. Aircraft like to have systems that are fail-safe, and if one of your ignition systems fail, there's another one ready to pick up the slack. So with both of the magnetos firing, so we've got 2 sparks effectively in each cylinder, then we're running at 1200 RPM. But if we switch from both to just the left system, we'll watch and see the RPMs drop a little bit, because you haven't got quite as efficient combustion going on in the cylinders. Let's put it back to both, make sure we can do that, and you can see the RPMs rise again to 1200. Let's try the right system. Again, a little bit lower than 1200, but not significantly lower, which is what you might find if you had maybe one of the ignition systems or one of the spark plugs of one of the magneto systems in one of your cylinders wasn't quite right. But this looks fine. This looks like all, I'm going to say 4 cylinders. I think it's a 4-cylinder engine. I think these are all Continental, I'm going to get this wrong, Continental O200 engines, something like that. Put that back to both before I forget about it. So ROSAMs, we've done M for mixture, and then the final one is suction, also known as a vacuum. We also make sure that is between 3 and 5 inches of mercury. So yeah, we're in the green basically. That looks good. Let's just quickly check while we're down here, make sure that the oil temperature has risen into the green and it's not flying up to the top. Everything looks really nice. We've got plenty of fuel, and yeah, this looks like a good aircraft. Okay, I'm going to return to the checklist. Next thing that we need to do is raise the flaps in stages. 30 to 20, 20 to 10, 10 to fully up. That all looks good. Let's jump back inside and we'll set our instruments. Okay, so 2 instruments that we need to set. First of all, we are staying within the pattern, so we are just going to turn the pressure gauge, the pressure setting until the altimeter reads 0, and this basically means you're at ground level. If you're measuring the height above ground level at the airfield, it's called QFE, also known as AAL, above airfield level, but QFE is typically what you'll hear when you're flying, which means above the ground at the airfield. You only really use QFE, or you only use QFE when you are near an airfield that you're about to land at, typically, or take off from. It's good to know when you do set it at 0, it's good to know, actually, make a note of what the QNH is. So the QNH here is 1024 hectopascals, or millibars as it used to be known. Hectopascals is a lot more common these days. I actually think hectopascals is the European standard, or the ICAO standard, International Civil Aviation Organization. Somebody correct me please in the comments. But yeah, on the left is what the whole world uses apart from America. They're a little bit they kind of do their own thing, don't they, America, because they can, because they're America and they're the world's biggest economy, and they've got things like a space program and whatnot. Not that I'm jealous, but there we go. So Americans use funny dates with the month at the beginning, and they also use funny pressure settings. So they use inches of mercury, which you can see on the right hand side here. So 1024 hectopascals is also 302246. So 3026 on the altimeter setting, as they call it. We just say QNH, they say altimeter. Bear in mind the PPL license allows you to fly anywhere in the world, pretty much where the the state that you're flying within is a member of ICAO, the International Civil Aviation Organization. So you need to learn about these things, about the different variations in different countries. But here in the UK, when we fly around, it's all QNH or QFE using the hectopascal scale. I mentioned QFE before, that's height above the ground. QNH is the height above, it's the altitude above mean sea level. Now, above mean sea level, my airfield is 197 feet, so it's about there. And what you'll find is that's generally 7 hectopascals more than what we were previously on. So 1024 plus 7 is 1031. Yes, so it's there or thereabouts. If we were coming from a nearby large airfield like Newcastle Airport, Newcastle Airport would allow us to fly, or tell us to fly, on QNH 1031, and then as we got close to this airfield, because we were coming into land, we would set the QFE and we'd take 7 off 1031, which would give us 1024, and that would give us an indication of where the ground was when we were coming into land. How clever is that? How did I know it was 7 hectopascals between 0 and 200 feet? Basically, there is 1 hectopascal for every... You go up 1 hectopascal of pressure on here for every 30 feet that you go up in altitude. So, rounding up 197 feet is as close as makes no difference to 200, which is as close to no difference as 210, which is easily divisible by 7. 210, 21, divided by 7 gives you 7. Divided by 3. So divided into groups of 30 gives you 7. So 7 times 30 gives you 210 feet. I hope that made more sense in your head than it did in mine. Seems so obvious in your brain when you're trying to work it out, but there it is. So it's always good to know the elevation of the airfield that you're flying into, so that you can try and figure out, divide it by 30 feet, and you can divide the elevation by 30 feet, and you can then find out how many hectopascals will be different. Excellent. We all following? Clear as mud? Marvellous. So now the other instrument that we're going to check as well is we're going to align the compass, which is magnetic, with the DI. So the DI, direction indicator, also looks like a compass, but it's not magnetic at all, which is why you can see the compass is pointing just past or just before east, and down here it's pretty much north. So this is controllable by us, the pilots. Now why would you do that, might you think? Well, the magnetic compass, when you're doing things like turns and if you're in turbulence, it's not very accurate, basically. So what we have here, the DI, is a gyroscope-based instrument. So it's got wheels that spin up really fast inside of it, and it gives you a gyroscopic direction. The trouble is, it's as you are doing turns and as you're doing various things, this DI becomes slightly less accurate over time. So you can lose or gain 15 degrees for every hour that you fly. So periodically, generally every 10 minutes, we would just realign this DI with the magnetic compass, and that just means that we have a stable direction indicator. So while we're on the ground here, couldn't get any more stable or straight and level than this. We check up here and we see that we are 10 degrees less than east, but you've got to be careful of this in the real aircraft too. If we move to the right, you'll notice that it is almost exactly 80 degrees on the compass, and that's called parallax. You need to be very careful of the parallax, because while you're sat over here it looks like we're almost 75 degrees, but that's not the case because the compass sits in the middle. Now I think if you're spending a couple of $100 on a plane, you'd probably want a compass in front of you, or one on either side or something like that, but Cessna did not decide to do that. So yeah, we just need to be aware of it. So we said it was 80 degrees which is remarkably there. So we already have a heading bug on 80. I'm going to move that out of the way though for one good reason, and that is I like to set the heading bug on to the runway direction to make it easier to see. Ooh, I've moved the wrong dial. Put that back onto 80, and then we'll put that onto the 010, also known as 10 degrees, which is the runway heading, and that just gives us a nice quick visual indication that we are on the runway heading. Whew. Right, we're about to get moving now. How long have we been recording? 30 minutes, really, already? Wow. Okay, on the plus side, my CPU is sat at 18%, and we are sat at 60 FPS, which is pretty good going, and I think we have slightly better textures now. Okay, so I'm going to pop the toe brakes forward, which will disengage the parking brake. I'm going to pull back the power just a touch so we don't fly forward, and then we're going to try a BRI check. In fact, I've forgotten something. Let me just check first of all. Yep, flaps are up. A couple more things that we need to do. We need to check that the radios are on and tuned. So we'll turn on the avionics. We'll set the transponder to standby, which basically means it's warming up, it's not broadcasting anything. Check the squawk code is 7000, which is this is called the conspicuity code, and this basically means that we are flying VFR, visual flight rules. We are not on a flight plan. We're just going to bop around, do our own thing, and we are not with any air traffic control. This airfield is effectively uncontrolled. It does have an air-to-ground communication system, AGCS. The staff at the airport do carry radios around with them, attached to their belt clips and things like that. But if they're busy or if they've left them in the office, then you basically have to assume it's an unstaffed airfield. So there's no information, there's no traffic, there's nothing like that. We just have to radio broadcast our intentions. So that's what we'll do. So the radio is on, we'll check for lookout, and then we'll call for taxi clearance. So we'll look out, there's nothing around any approaching aircraft because the windsock is showing that the wind is coming from our left. Any arriving aircraft will be coming from our right, so we can't quite see it. Here we'll have to peek past the wing, nothing on approach. I'm not actually connected to any online services right now, so that's not a surprise. And then we would radio for taxi clearance. And what we would say is, I'm just going to ignore the registration of this aircraft because I need to get some muscle memory built up for the aircraft that I fly. So at this point I would push down the radio button and I would say Golf Alpha Whiskey Uniform Juliet, radio check 122.855, backtracking runway 01 to Bravo. Now what that all means is, first of all, we say, in fact I didn't say it, did I? So we would start off by saying Airshot Radio, Golf Alpha Whiskey Uniform Juliet, radio check 122.855, backtracking runway 01 to Bravo. The frequency, the radio frequency at the airfield is 122.855, and that's basically when you're near the airfield, you tune to that radio frequency and then you start announcing your intentions to anybody on the frequency. And what we do is, although it's actually set up for Unicom on here, VATSIM's Unicom, normally we'd have 122.855 tuned in there, and on either ready to go 124.380, which is Newcastle approach, which is just to the south of us, you can see on the GPS. Or we would have Scottish information, which is 119 something. I can't remember. But yeah, I've got all these written down for when I'm actually flying, which is good. Okay, so we've done our radio call. Everyone knows that we're about to enter the runway because we just said we're about to backtrack it. Release the brakes, and we're going to power it forward. Once we're moving, I'm going to immediately press both brakes down. There we go. So both brakes are working. If they weren't, our nose would have gone left or right. Let's just leave a little bit of power on. These engines do not like to idle too low. So this is the BRI check. B is brakes, next is rudder. So that's basically, can we steer left and right? So there's right, there's left. And then we also check the instruments. So as we turn to the right, we want to see the DI, the direction indicator, the numbers on that increasing, so we want it to be turning anti-clockwise. We want to see the compass at the top. We want to see those numbers increasing, which they are. And we want to see the turn coordinator, which is the little plane at the bottom left. You want to see that starting to show a turn as well. And finally, we want to see the artificial horizon staying flat throughout. That's great. I'm doing a terrible job of taxiing here because I'm trying to talk about instruments. So Bravo is actually over here, and this is where we will do our power checks. So we want to make sure that this engine isn't just good at low speeds, but is actually going to be nice and safe to take us into the air. So remember, the windsock is showing that the wind is from the north, so we'll use that extra airflow over the engine to keep it cool while we do these checks. So I'm going to use the checklist again, just because this is good muscle memory for me. So location, aircraft positioned into the wind, clear all round, taxiing runway, surface checked. That's good. Parking brake is on. I'm actually using my feet, but that's good enough. Oil temperature and pressure. You might hear me say T's and P's. That's temperatures and pressures. So everything to do with the oil is currently in the green. That's looking really nice. Next, magnetos. Check that we are on both. RPM set 1700, brakes holding. Yep, brakes are holding, and we're on 1700 without looking. Carb heat. If we had one, we would pull the carb heat, make sure there's no ice, get a bit of heat through the carburetor. And then the next check is magnetos. So again, at this power setting, we check to make sure that the magnetos haven't failed while we were doing all the other checks. So we should see a drop in the RPMs. So let's go left. There's a drop, but it hasn't cut out, which means that the left system is working. Go back to both. Rises back to 1700 RPM. The right system is also working. Back to both. Check that the suction, the vacuum, is working. Yeah, that's fine. And the ammeter is charging, or not negative at least. All good. Finally, we'll come back to the oil temperatures and pressures, make sure everything is still in the green, which it is, and then we can check for an idle cutout, which is basically pull the power back, make sure the engine doesn't cut out at idle. That would be not a good thing, definitely not a good thing in the air. And then we set it back to 1200 just to keep that heat in the engine. Pre-takeoff checks. Check to make sure that our trim is set for takeoff, which it is. Throttle friction nut is finger tight, so at this point we tighten up the throttle friction nut. It's easy for me to say. I was always taught to turn it until it's tight, like finger tight, and then give it another quarter of a turn more. That actually gives you a nice tightness of the power control without impeding your ability to move it. Set the mixture to rich. Yep. Magnetos on both. Pitot heater as required. I'm going to put the pitot heater on just because it is below 5 degrees. Primer in and locked, not modelled on this aircraft. Fuel still on. Nobody's knocked that during our checks. That's all good. Flaps as required. So the flaps are still up because we put them up before. We're going to lower them to 10 degrees for takeoff. Instruments and gauges. Let's just check. Ooh, see, you don't want to do that. Check that the DI, which is currently showing at 20 degrees, is also showing at 20 degrees on here. There we go. Also make sure that the altimeter is still showing 0. Everything else looks flat or zeroed out, which is great. Hatches and harnesses fastened and secure. Carb heat, at this point we would set it back to cold, so it's had a bit of time to warm up. Controls full and free movement. Remember, we go out. Now this is important, even on X-Plane, because I've set it to have random failures every few minutes. So things can fail. I have had flaps fall off. I have had the rudder fall off, which was not fun. Thankfully still had the fin. It was still controllable. So all that is looking good. Finally, transponder. We set the transponder from standby. It's all nicely warmed up. We set it to altitude. And then we get our clearances, we line up and we take off. Now at this point we would also generally put the landing light on, but it's not typically during VFR day, which is daytime when you're flying VFR. Now my instructor and I do like to put these lights on just purely because it gives you a bit of extra visibility. People can see you better. Okay, strobes are on, everything is looking absolutely hunky-dory. Let's bring the power back again because we're going to do some taxiing. And at this point we would make another radio call and we'd say Golf Uniform Juliet, lining up for departure, runway 01. In fact we wouldn't, we would say Golf Uniform Juliet, ready for departure, lining up, runway 01. Either of those would really work, people would know what you mean. But might as well be disciplined while we're learning, especially when we're doing something silly like actually recording ourselves doing it and trying to put it on the internet. You want to try and be vaguely correct. Okay, shall we go flying? Stop there. Nose wheel is straight, that's also important. I have tried to take off with a slightly wonky nose wheel and just basically makes the nose go left or right and the instructor has to step in and say let's abort the takeoff, which is not fun. Okay, you ready? So I'm going to push down a little bit on the right rudder because when we start pushing the power forward, the propeller wash will hit the left hand side of the tail, which will push the nose to the left. So a bit of right rudder will help us stay straight on this runway. So we're looking for that airspeed indicator at the top left to move. It is. Airspeed is alive. Our T's and P's bottom left are all in the green and our RPMs are nice and stable. We're waiting for 60 knots. There's 60, and we just gently pull back. She's ready to fly. She doesn't need a lot of coaxing. And then we want to kind of hold the nose so that we pitch for 60 degrees. So let that airspeed bleed off to 60. Don't want to get too much below it. And then when we're at 300 feet, we want to bring up those flaps, which will make the nose drop because we're losing some of our lift. So there's 300 feet. Do it for, you can see the nose dropping, did that just for show, would never allow that to happen in the real aircraft. Get that nose back up. So we also have less drag, which means that we can put the nose even further up. Now what I have done is missed my turning point, so at 500 feet we would turn to the left. You'd always do a left lookout, so you would look under your wing. So you want to keep climbing at 60, bring this around till you see that mountain in the distance. So speed is creeping up. I am terrible for allowing my speed to creep up during a climb, so we really want to climb quickly. I also wouldn't climb through this cloud layer. It's but yeah, I'm in a sim, so I've also busted through my pattern altitude. Things are going really well, basically. Things are going extremely well right now. So we're going to level off, we're going to be disciplined and get back down to 1,000 feet, which is the circuit height. There's 1,000. Maintain 2300 RPM. Try and keep it level. This is a lot easier in the real aircraft than it is on here. Now then, what we're going to do is I'm going to turn left here, and this is our downwind. So we're a bit far over to the west right now. We're a bit far to the right than what I would normally accept. What you can see up ahead is a triangular field, almost. And this actually looks like a penguin in reality. It's got a penguin shape to it. So we're going to fly down this way over Penguin Field. We're going to try and maintain 1,000 feet, and because we're on downwind, we will do a radio call and we will say Golf Uniform Juliet, downwind runway 01. So everyone knows where we are in the pattern. We would do our quick bum filch check, so check brake pressure, undercarriage, mixtures rich, fuel, plenty for a go around. Instruments, so check the DI is correct, make sure the T's and P's are in the green. Landing light is on, carb heat to hot, and hatches and harnesses. And we're over that triangular field now, Penguin Field as we've come to call it, my instructor and I. We have descended just a touch, but now we're going to start configuring. So carb heat out, power to 1500, watch our airspeed come down into the white arc. I'm going to turn onto base leg here, try and maintain 1000 feet. That's not working particularly well. Now we're in the white arc. You can hear that I'm dropping 2 notches of flaps, and we're going to wait for our speed to get to 60. There's 60. I'm going to make sure my engine power is at 1500 RPM, and that should allow us to descend quite nicely. So can't quite see the airfield very easily. I think I'm going to overshoot it, so I'm just going to turn to the right here. Yep, so we've overshot. Now a lot of newbie pilots will pull back hard to try and make that. We're not going to panic. That's bad. Panicking is bad, and that's what makes you stall. So we're a bit high, we're a bit fast. We're going to pull the nose up to slow us down, and we are going to get properly lined up with the runway at 60 knots. We're going to need a bit more power, because you can see that the runway was kind of dropping in our windscreen there, which means that our descent rate wasn't quite right. So let's get this straight. Look all the way down the runway. We're a bit quick, so pull the nose back just a touch. Pull the nose back just a touch. Again, a lot easier in the real aircraft, I would say. And then as we come over the threshold, this tree is not there for real life, thankfully. I'm going to bring it down. We're going to start flying level here, and then we are going to pull back, pull back, pull back. Nice landing. That'll do for tomorrow. Now, I kind of wish I had gone full power there and did a go around, because now we are going to have to pop a UE, aren't we? Yes, I'll be happy with that. Landing tomorrow. So let's just spin her around. And we can rally it a bit, because it's a simulator, but also you can kind of rally these things in real life. My instructor has been known to do something similar to that. I don't want to get him in trouble anyway. He's a good guy. So we're going to go back down to the end of the runway. Let's do another circuit. Don't need to do a power check. We've just taken her up into the air. We know the engine works and everything works, but we do need to reconfigure. It's very important, and I'm going to have to remember this. If I'm given an aircraft straight after it's landed to go and do another circuit, if I took off now, the aircraft would not be in a position to take off. Why? Well, let's have a look. So our trim is not set for takeoff. It's set for low power, low speed approach. And what did we do during the low speed approach? We set our flaps not to 10 degrees, which is our takeoff flaps, but to 20 degrees. So we're going to set that to 10 degrees for takeoff. It's also a good check at this point just to make sure your DI and your compass is aligned. So 10 degrees, turn this a little bit to 10 degrees. You can see the runway slightly off to the right, our heading bug is slightly off to the right. But apart from that, we are good to go. So heels on the floor, slight right rudder, progress to full power. Let's get on the centre line. We're watching for the airspeed to come up. Airspeed is alive, T's and P's are in the green, RPMs are stable. Waiting for 60 knots. There's 60 knots, she wants to fly, pull back, and she's up. Just wind out a little bit of that right rudder. You don't have to do that in real life, but you do have to do it in this. The right rudder you need on the ground in the 172 basically means that you're flying off to the right hand side in the aircraft. We're not going to miss our 300 foot flap up point this time. So there's 300. I'm going to hold the nose up so that it doesn't drop. Oh, there's the stall warning horn, so we'll just release a bit of pressure. And then at 450 knots, have a quick check, quick wing tilt, and then we're going to start our left turn off to the west. Sometimes the nose doesn't move, sometimes there's wind on the tail or something and you just can't get that nose to move, in which case you just have to give it a bit of a kick of rudder to get it turning. So again, we are going to climb. I'm allowing that speed to come up far, far, far too much, and this is exactly what I do in real life, because I can't see over the nose. I'm trying to find a point to look at to guide my direction. I have no horizon right now, so I'm going to use the artificial horizon, which is exactly what you do if you found yourself unexpectedly in a zero visibility situation. I'm going to assume that we are near the triangular field here, because we've been at 1,000 feet QFE, so above the airfield level, for some time now. And we're going to head this way, and we're going to level out at just south, is pretty much heading towards the triangular field, which I think I can see through the haze. And again, you can see the speed creeping up, you can see the VSI showing a vertical speed down. And we go Golf, Uniform Juliet, downwind, runway 01. So we're going to head down, we're going to do our bump filch, brakes, undercarriage, mixture, fuel, instruments, landing light, carb heat out, hatches and harnesses. That's the bump filch check done. We're over the triangular field here. Can't look down easily, can we? Not easily, no. And then we'll start to configure for landing. So power back to 1500. Hold that nose up, because we want the speed to bleed off. So we're going to be past this golf course, because there's rich people lives on the golf course. There's the white arc on the airspeed indicator, which means that we can start to lower the flaps. I'm going to keep holding that nose up until we get to 60. I'm going to do a rate 1 turn now, because we don't have a lot of airspeed. There's 60. I'm going to turn to the east. I'm going to use the DI to tell me where east is. And I'm going to make sure the power's at 1500. Trim for 60 knots. Have a look out for the A1, which is our... I've gone a bit far to the... I've turned a bit too far to the north there, and there's the runway. So this is so much easier when you can just peek out the window. Okay, so let's get lined up. We are not at 60. Let's hold that nose up just a little bit. Get nicely lined up with the runway. Honestly, flying in a sim is so much more difficult than flying for real. Let's use that rudder a bit to get us lined up. That's what it's there for. So we are nicely coming down. Hold that nose up, watch the speed bleed off a bit, because I'm at fairly low power, and then actually I'm going to use that power now just to leave that runway exactly where it is in the windscreen, and this time we're going to do a touch and go. Speed is coming up, but our descent rate is actually a bit fast. Sorry, our height is a bit high too, so if we reduce our power here, that tree really puts me off. Fly level here, fly level here, fly level here. Now I've gone too far down. It would be unsafe at this point to do a go around, so let's do what we did before. And again, not a bad landing, a bit far down the runway. I'll be okay doing that tomorrow, because I'm only allowed to do a single circuit by myself, unless there's, you know, an unstable approach or something like that. I'm trained to do go arounds, and I would seriously consider going around if that's the safest thing to do. If my approach is unstable, if I'm not happy with the landing in any way, shape or form, if I feel unsafe, I'll go around, because you're safe in the air, you're not safe on an unstable approach. That tree, I keep trying to edit that tree out using the world editor tool, the WED world editor. I don't know why it's not called the wet. But yeah, we've basically got to fly through a tree, and it's very, very off-putting. That does not exist for realsies. So we're going to swing this around. What two things do we need to check, because we are out of configuration? Three, really. Three in the real aircraft. So one of them is the carb heat. On approach we leave the carb heat out because we're in a low power situation, so we would make sure the carb heat was back in. Flaps are still at 20. Ooh, that's all the way up, didn't mean to do that. And the other thing is trim. We are out of trim. We're in exactly the same trim as we were before, slightly nose forward, because on approach we have lots of flaps out, and that gives you that basically balloons the aircraft. It makes the aircraft go up, so you've got to have slightly nose forward pressure on the controls. To release the pressure on the controls, you do nose forward trim. How long are we recording? 55 minutes. Wow. Whew, time flies when you're doing terrible circuits with half decent landings, doesn't it? So carb heat will be back in. I need a mnemonic for that. Trim, carb heat, flaps. FTC, the Federal Trade Commission, because they'll come after you if you don't get it right. Flaps, trim, carb heat. Right, I'm going to try FTC as my own little brain mnemonic. Okay, let's go flying again. This time, let's try and do a touch and go. Waiting for the airspeed to come alive. Airspeed's alive. T's and P's are in the green. RPMs are nice and stable. Waiting for 60. There's 60. Pull back. Release a little bit of that right rudder just because X-plane. Nice blue skies ahead now. Let's pitch up. Next major important thing, once we've got 60 nicely pitched, is the flaps up. Bit more right rudder. Waiting for 300. There's 300. Flaps are up. Catch that nose before it drops, and you can raise the nose a bit more because you have lower drag. And at this point, I'll just pitch for 60. Pitch for 60 and trim for 60. There's 500. I would have done a wing tilt at 450. Again, a lot easier because you can just have a peek. That is too much bank. You want no more than 15 degrees bank. For some reason this aircraft likes to bank. We've overshot west. So let's be disciplined and turn back to west, and we're going to try and intercept 1,000 feet. You'll notice again my speed has crept up. I am terrible for that. Let's lower the nose again, using the artificial horizon a bit this time. Use all the information available to you. Let the speed climb a bit. 2300 RPM in a 172, 2450 in a 150. There we go, nice and stable. Do a rate 2 turn, so that's a 30 degree bank turn. We're going to head to the south. There's Triangle Field. That looks a lot closer than it was before. Golf Uniform Juliet, downwind runway 01. That was me making a radio call. So when you're on downwind, the wind's behind you, you generally find that your prop speed creeps up a bit. Do our bump filch checks, brakes, undercarriage, mixture, fuel, and flaps are up. Instruments, landing light, carb heat out, hatches, and harnesses. And we should be near the end of the runway, which we are, and we are descending, which is not great, and we're in cloud, which is also not great. So we will go to 1500 RPM, configuring for landing. So 1500 RPM, carb heat would also come out in the real aircraft. Waiting for the white arc. White arc, 2 notches of flaps. I'm going to make a turn because we're at 1800 feet now. Wait for the speed. There's 60, so we're going to turn towards the east. I'm going to let that nose drop just a touch, keep that speed, get the power back to 1500. Try not to overshoot this time. Probably already have overshot. Let's hold that nose up. Oh no, I think I'm going to get it this time. So we'll start that turn onto base. Onto base? Onto final. get nicely lined up, and then we'll sort out the speed. Golf Uniform Juliet, final runway 01. If you find yourself swinging from side to side, don't try and sort it out with the ailerons, because the ailerons don't control the nose going left and right. Use your rudder. What I find is just applying any sort of positive rudder will sort out a swinging left to right nose. So I think we're a bit low there. I'm just going to apply a bit more power. So I'm not really in trim where I would like it to be. If I was flying solo tomorrow at 80 knots, I would think about going around. Let's trade a little bit of that power for altitude. That bloody tree. Okay, power at idle. Bring it down, keep it coming down. Fly level, fly level, fly level. Hold it off, hold it off, hold it off. Full power, carb heat in. Now this time we do have 20 degrees of flaps. There's 60 knots, bring her up. As soon as you have vertical speed and 100 knots, then we will bring the first notch of flaps up. There's 100 feet, bring the first notch of flaps in. Again, catch that nose, because it will drop every time you raise the flaps. You know, flaps up, pull the nose up. That's what my instructor says, and that's a really good mnemonic to have. We're not climbing as fast as we could be. We want to get away from the ground, because that gives us options. Bring that next notch of flaps up. So climbing at 60 is our best climb rate, which means that we climb to the highest altitude in the shortest period of time, which is kind of what you want. You want to get away from the ground. That's why you always have full power when you're taking off in a airliner going on holiday. You want to get away from the ground, because that then gives you some options in case there's any problems with, for example, one of the engines flaming out. Let's try and be better with our speed this time. So we're heading roughly west, 800 degrees, 800 feet. 50 feet to go. Keep that climb coming. Keep that climb coming. There's 1,000. Start to level off. Power back to 2300. 2300. 2450. I'll be looking for. Check wing tilt. Let's turn left. Rate 2 turn. So if you're climbing, it's a rate 1 turn. If you're descending or turning, when you are straight and level, well, not straight and level, or yeah, maintaining an altitude, then you can use a rate 2 turn. So we're heading straight for that triangular field again. Speed's crept up because we are now heading downwind. Let's get back to pattern altitude. Honestly, when you've got the ability just to peak all the time for realsies, it's a lot easier. Golf Uniform Juliet, downwind runway 01. And we do our bum filter checks, brakes, undercarriage, mixtures rich. Flaps are up, fuel enough for a go around. Instruments are good, T's and P's are in the green, DI is aligned with the compass. Landing lights, carb heat out, hatches and harnesses, and we will start to configure with the carb heat out. We'll keep that out for the duration of the approach. So hold that nose up. There's the white arc. 20 degrees of flaps. Try and catch that nose. The nose is rising. Can't tell it's rising because we're in the clouds, which is illegal. Naughty. But again, simulator. Sometimes it happens. Sometimes weather fronts come in. You've got to know how to use your other instruments. I did a really good instrument flying lesson with my instructor on lesson 4, I think it was. I did a blog about it and put the handmaiden's tail pictures at the top of it, because that's exactly what it felt like, with a hood over you so you couldn't see outside and you just had to use your instruments. That's really helped me to basically use any information that I have available to me. So if I did fly into clouds, then you would use the turn coordinator at the bottom left to do a proper rate 1 turn, 15 degree turn for 1 minute, and that'll take you 180 degrees, and you could that'll basically take you heading out the direction that you just came. Because if you fly into cloud, you don't know anything apart from the fact that recently you weren't in cloud. So a rate 1 turn for 1 minute will take you 180 degrees and back out where you know that there isn't cloud, so you'll be back to being legal again. Talking because I can't believe that this approach is actually quite as stable as it is. Power to idle. Pull back, pull back, pull back, fly level, pull back, try and catch it, bit of left rudder, bit of left rudder, bit of left rudder. Not on the centre line, but a good landing. Okay, if there's anybody here after 1 hour and 5 minutes, you are absolute legends. You actually notice that the wind has turned slightly to be from the north or northwest, or west-northwest. So what we would do after landing, for anyone who's still here, honestly if you are still here, that's amazing. That really is amazing, watching me fly about in a flight sim. I hope it's been useful. I might start doing some streaming so I can answer some questions as I go. So this is Charlie, this is a holding point that we stop at, and we would normally do our power checks, well we do after landing checks here, so let me just flip to my after landing checks. There's pre-landing, which was the bum filch. After landing, carb heat to cold, flaps up. Attitude, oh no, hang on, that's go around, we don't want that one. Carb heat cold, flaps up. Throttle friction nut loose, squeak, squeak, squeak. That's dumb. Radio, nav, aids, electrics, non-essentials off. So we'll put that back to standby. Yeah, that's fine. Trimmer, set neutral for the next people to come in, just in case they don't check it. Then, you know, at least we've set it up for them so that they're not going to suddenly find themselves climbing or can't lift the nose or anything like that. And the next checklist is our shutdown checklist. So, wind is still from the north, so any traffic will be coming from the south, so we will be able to see it. And at this point I would radio and just say Golf Uniform Juliet backtracking runway 01 to parking. Or backtracking runway 01 to fuel, more likely. Is it more likely? No, because I normally fly first thing in the morning, so... So what they do is they fill the aircraft up full in the morning. The fuel level in this is accurate. I would normally arrive to a fully fueled aircraft with typically 13 gallons. I want to say 13 gallons in each wing. One thing when you're taxiing, if you're in the left seat, the dotted white line should feel like it's going through your right knee, and if you're in the left seat, which is the seat I'm in now, which is the seat I and every student basically learns in, because you've got the instruments right in front of you, yeah, right knee. And if you're in the right hand side seat, so if you're an instructor or a passenger, you probably shouldn't be taxiing too much if you're a passenger, but if you do, then that dotted white line should be going through your left shoulder. I don't know what the difference is. I don't know why it would be left shoulder rather than left knee, but that's just what I was taught. Now, one thing that's interesting about, I say interesting, you've got to have a certain aviation mindset to find any of this interesting, but you're here after an hour and 8 minutes, nearly an hour and 9 minutes, so you must have some interest in this stuff. One thing that's interesting is that actually you generally park your aircraft facing into the wind, rather than exposing that vertical fin to any wind that might move the aircraft around. So if the wind is from the north, you'll find that the aircraft in the morning are parked to the north, facing to the north. Okay, shutdown, location, not obstructing anything, into the wind, nose wheel straight. Parking brake is currently my toes, but I'm going to put the parking brake on because I can. Engine, 1200 RPM, I've actually just done that already, just out of habit. Oh no, that's 1300 RPM, that's a disaster. 1200 RPM for 30 seconds. Next thing is we do a magnetos check. So is the left magneto system still working? Yes it is. Back to both. Is the right system working? Yes, it is. Back to both. And that's just for the next people who use the aircraft. Making sure that these checks are done now means that if we spotted a problem, if one of the magneto systems wasn't working, we could immediately notify maintenance before the next flight. Turn off radio, nav aids, everything else. So turn it off. On our aircraft you have to hold down the off button before it turns off. And then we'll turn off the avionics switches here. There we go. Interesting to see the ADIs. The automatic direction indicator is moving as well from that. I do know how to use ILSs and stuff like that, the VORs and glide slopes, localizers, those sorts of things, but I don't know, because you don't learn those things, I don't think, on the PPL course. Just on the instrument rating, that's right, the IR. So radio nav aids off, throttle closed, mixture, idle cut off, propellers come to a stop. Next we turn the magnetos off, tick, 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 tick. Electrics are all off, master switch off, so we're no longer on the clock. So I remember what this is called. This is obviously called the Hobbs meter, and this is, like I say, this is what you get charged on. So the instructor will have made a note of what that is when he first came to the aircraft, and then again he'll have made a note of it after shutdown, and he will times the number of hours, which is in decimals. So the number of hours is 29.5 hours. I think so. Yeah, 29.5 hours I've flown in this aircraft, which is quite a lot, really, considering X-Plane 12 hasn't been out that long. I think I might need to get some other hobbies or get out more. Okay, magnetos off, electrics off, master switch off, fuel cock. There's no way to turn it off, so we'll just leave it on both. We do generally leave it on in the aircraft anyway after landing, because there's normally another student coming. I don't know what they do at the end of the day. I've never flown the last lesson of the day. I'm presuming that they turn it off, and then the student has the joys of dragging the aircraft into the hangar, which would be maybe fun or not fun, depending on the weather. Harnesses, seatbelts, left tidy. There is the chief flight instructor will fly you off the out of the airfield and drop you from 1,000 feet if you do leave the seatbelts not tidy. Security, chocks, ties, park brake, pitot cover as required, and then also you may want to put the control cover in, especially if it's windy conditions. And that is a full lesson's worth of a flight. So 1 hour 13 minutes is actually about the time it would take me to do a lesson, a 1 hour lesson. So yeah, I hope that's been useful. I hope you've maybe learned something or had something confirmed to you that you thought you might have known. If you're already a PPL, if I've got something wrong, I would love to hear about it in the comments as well. As soon as you feel like you know it all, then this hobby, this industry, this activity will bite you in the arse. So yeah, I don't expect to get everything right. I'm open to learning. I'm open to being corrected, as we all should be as aviators. And yeah, that's why we have a healthy safety culture. So there we go. There is our beautiful Cessna with its wheel spats on. I think the 172s look lovely. I'm now used to a much smaller aircraft. I say much smaller. Doesn't really have that back window. Doesn't have 4 seats, just a 2-seater aircraft. It is just a bit smaller, a bit lighter, a bit more fun in some ways, because it is you can throw it around a bit more than the 172, which is very, very manoeuvrable. It's just a bit heavier. Trying to work out if that's my nose whistling, because I have started to get a bit of a nose thing, or if it's actually like bird song on X-Plane. Anywho, there we go. Thanks for watching. I really, really do appreciate it. Hope you've enjoyed it. Bye bye.